Picture yourself finishing dinner in Tokyo. You hand the server cash, they hand you exact change, and that's it. No tip line. No awkward math in your head. Try leaving extra money on the table, and in some restaurants, someone will literally chase you down the street to give it back, convinced you simply forgot it. Now picture the same dinner in New York. The bill comes, and suddenly you're doing percentage calculations, debating 18 versus 20, wondering if the bartender judged you for tipping in cash instead of on the card machine that's now staring at you expectantly. Why does one of the richest countries on earth rely on customers to top up workers' wages, while most of the world considers that idea borderline insulting? Let's start with the surprising part. Tipping didn't start in America. It actually started in Europe, among aristocrats in the 1700s, who gave small sums of money to servants as a gesture of upper-class generosity, a way of saying, I have so much wealth, a little extra means nothing to me. Wealthy Americans traveling abroad in the 1800s picked up the habit and brought it home, hoping it made them look sophisticated and worldly. Here's the twist nobody expects. Europe largely abandoned the practice over the following century. America did not. It did the opposite. It built an entire wage system around it. The real turning point happened right after the Civil War. Roughly 4 million formerly enslaved people were suddenly part of the labor force, and many restaurant and railroad companies, particularly the Pullman Railway Company, hired them for service jobs while refusing to pay them a real wage at all. Tips became the loophole. Companies argued customers, not employers, should cover these workers' income, paying little or nothing themselves. This wasn't a side effect of tipping culture. Historians studying the period have argued tipping in America was essentially built on top of underpaying black workers in the decades right after slavery ended. This loophole eventually became federal law. In 1938, the United States created the minimum wage, but the restaurant industry lobbied successfully for an exception called the tipped minimum wage. Under this system, employers can legally pay servers as little as $2.13 an hour federally, as long as tips bring their total earnings up to the standard minimum wage. If tips don't cover the gap, the employer is technically required to make up the difference, though labor researchers have found that rule frequently goes unenforced. That $2.13 figure, by the way, hasn't changed since 1991. It's been frozen for over 3 decades while the cost of living kept climbing. Compare that to nearly everywhere else. In Japan, South Korea, and across most of Europe, servers are paid a full standard wage by their employer, the same as any other job. Tipping isn't just unnecessary. It can genuinely be seen as implying the worker isn't paid enough, an awkward suggestion that their employer is failing them. In Australia, after the country introduced strong minimum wage protections across all industries decades ago, tipping never took hold at all, because there was never a wage gap for it to fill in the first place. So why hasn't America just fixed this the same way other countries did? Mainly because the restaurant industry has spent decades lobbying hard to protect the tipped wage system, arguing that eliminating it would force menu prices up and potentially cost service jobs. Some studies support parts of that argument. Others, particularly research out of states that have already eliminated the tipped minimum wage, like California, Washington, and Oregon, suggest servers in those states actually report similar or higher average earnings than in states still using the lower tipped wage. The debate is genuinely unsettled, but the financial incentive for the industry to keep the current system intact is enormous. Here's the part that surprises most people. Tip inflation, what some call tipflation or guilt tipping, has been spreading well beyond restaurants. Coffee shops, self-checkout kiosks, even some retail counters now flash a tip screen at customers before they even receive a service. Surveys throughout the early 2020s have repeatedly shown a majority of Americans saying they feel tipping has expanded into situations where it never used to apply, and a significant share report feeling pressured or even resentful about it. The system meant to reward exceptional service has, for many, started to feel like a mandatory tax with extra steps. There's also a quieter consequence almost nobody connects to tipping. Because income depends heavily on guest perception, studies have found tipping can introduce measurable bias, with some research showing servers receiving smaller tips based on factors completely unrelated to service quality, including race. A wage system meant to reward good work ends up, in practice, sometimes rewarding something else entirely. So why do Americans tip and the rest of the world doesn't? It's not really about generosity or customer satisfaction or culture in the way people usually assume. It's the surviving fossil of a decision made over 150 years ago, when companies realized they could let customers quietly cover wages instead of paying them directly, and that decision somehow never got undone. Every other country either never adopted it or eventually closed the loophole. America just left it open, and it grew into something nobody fully designed, but everybody now has to navigate. Next time that tip screen flips around and stares at you before you've even gotten your coffee, remember, you're not just being asked for a few extra dollars. You're interacting with a wage system built on a 19th century legal gap that, somehow, in 2026, still hasn't been closed. Do you think America should get rid of tipping completely? Or does the system actually work better than people think? Tell me in the comments. And if hidden history like this interests you, there's a video right here about the death of the American shopping mall.